according to Tolkien lore, a hobbit is officially an adult when they turn 33, which means Pippin was technically a teenager during Lord of the Rings. And as of quite recently, I can say I am officially an adult hobbit, which means I think we're due for a Hobbitcore project. Anyone who's been on Pinterest or Instagram has probably at some point seen Ren Faire or hobbity style stays, some of which are reversible. I have wanted my own pair of Ren Faire stays for a while now, and the idea of making them reversible is a brilliant bonus. So when I finally found the perfect fabric for both sides, I decided to start the new year off right and make myself a pair of reversible stays perfect for a Ren Faire loving hobbit. For the one side, I use this cute floral quilting cotton that I picked up at Walmart of all places. And for the other side, I use this absolutely gorgeous lightweight suiting wool that I found at a sale put on by my local fashion history museum. The pattern I'm using is the same one as my red and gold brocade corset, but with one difference. I wanted this corset to lace up in the front instead of the back. So while normally the center front would be cut on the fold and the center back would be cut on the edge, for this one I reversed it, and I'm cutting the center front on the edge and the center back on the fold. Floral side cut out, now time for the wool. And since this time I've already cut out the seam allowance on the floral fabric, I can use that as my easy cutting guide. Because the wool is so lightweight, it'll get lined with a stiff canvas which gets basted to the wrong side of the wool so that both fabrics function together as one. I started with the back, stitching the side back pieces to the center back, followed by the back middle pieces. And then I realized that I had attached the center back upside down, so my new seam ripper got to come out and play. Now we're back on track. And I repeated with the floral fabric, remembering to fix the center back before I stitched it up. Then I joined the center front to the side front pieces. One more set of middle side pieces get pinned in place and then sewn up. And now the back pieces can get joined to the front to make a corset shape. And yes, I pressed all my seams open and flat. Then I pinned both halves together, wrong sides facing each other, and sewed almost all the way around. I left the center front sides open, so I stopped sewing a little ways away from the edge. And it was about 3/4 of the way through sewing along the top edge that I remembered that I was supposed to leave a gap at the top for the boning to fit through. Oops. Hello, seam ripper, my old friend. The boning channels were really easy to put in, just sewing down one side of a seam, a few stitches across the bottom, and sewing up the other side of the seam. I still have a couple of steel bones from an old fast fashion corset that I had taken apart, so I used flat steel for the outermost edge and spiral steel for the next channel. For the bones in the other channels, I used synthetic baleen from Burnley and Trowbridge. I measured out all my bones and cut them to size, and then filed down the pointy corners. While I somehow didn't get footage of putting the bones in, I did that right after the edges were all nice and smooth. The corset needed binding, and since the pinstripe wool was so lightweight, I decided to use that instead of bias tape. Straight grain binding is historical, and I had enough fabric that it worked out really well. I pinned the strips together at right angles and stitched them along that angle. Then it was time to tackle the center front edges. I didn't want the logo of the fabric to show, but I also didn't want to cut it off, so I folded it in just enough to hide it. Then I turned the cotton in the same amount. The edges get sewn together by hand with a little whip stitch. Then it was time to bind the corset, first pinning the binding to the floral side. I realized at this moment that I had forgotten to add the boning channels for the center front. Kind of important, that. So I folded back the binding at the center front and quickly put those in. Then I stitched the binding on. Note that I'm stitching from the green side with the binding underneath and using the seam line as my guide because I thought I was being smart. This was not smart, and I ended up having to unpick several parts of the binding that got caught up and folded into the seam. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Once all the binding was sewn on and the wonky parts sorted out, I trimmed down the seam allowance by half. Then I flipped the corset and turned the raw edges under, pinning it to the green side. And I finished the edges with little whip stitches. The last step is to add eyelets. I marked these an inch apart, starting half an inch from the top. I had thought about using metal grommets, but the ones I have in my stash have a nice side and a side, which is fine for a corset that you're never going to see the inside of, but not good for a reversible garment. So I fell back on the good old tried and true hand-sewn eyelets. Sewing these in was more finicky than I thought, as both sides had to look reasonably nice. So there was a lot of flipping back and forth between the sides, checking to make sure nothing looked too wonky on the opposite side. Thankfully, the floral pattern did a good job to hide any out-of-place stitches. My eyelet speed has definitely gotten better over time, but each side still took between 90 minutes and 2 hours to finish. And there are also eyelets for the straps. The actual last step is to add the lacing. I found this cute green ribbon that matches both the pinstripe in the green side and some of the lighter green in the floral side. I trimmed them and heated the edges to prevent fraying. Then I threaded them into a pair of yarn needles and threaded them through the eyelets. And we're done! Now all that's left is to have some hobbity adventures, and these fit in both the fantastical as well as the modern mundanity. I love how these turned out. They are very comfortable. The reversible style means I have double the outfit options now, and I will definitely be wearing them in future adventures. They instantly give Hobbit meets Ren Faire Maiden in absolutely the best way. There's one tiny spot where the fit could have been slightly adjusted better if I had taken the time for a mock-up of the new lacing style, but honestly, if I don't say anything, I'll betcha no one can tell. So I hope you enjoyed this hobbity video. If you did, please hit the like button. It does help the algorithm push this video out to more potential geeky friends. And if you want to see more geekery meets history sewing adventures, please hit the subscribe button and stick around. If you want to support the channel, the link to my coffee is somewhere on the screen now. And I will see you all in my next video. This is why everyone goes with the wireless lav mics. Ugh. I am officially an adult. For both sides, I just started...